Hi everyone, before we start, a small disclaimer. You don't need this many watercolour palettes. Nobody needs this many watercolour palettes. But I collect watercolours in the same way that people collect, I don't know, stamps, handbags, Star Wars figures. And I am a full-time artist and illustrator, and I use these all the time and I love them. So with that being said, let's jump into the palette tour. We're starting with my main watercolour palette. So I put this together for the first time, I think a couple of years ago, and I've since then changed it a couple of times, just slightly, but it basically contains 47 colours, and I put this together thinking that it could cover everything that I'd possibly want to paint. They're a mix of big brand colours and handmade watercolours. There's just like a few handmade watercolours in this one. I love these earthy, muted, moody colours. You'll see throughout this video that these are the kinds of colours that I tend to gravitate towards. So this is how the palette looks. It just makes me happy looking at this actually. I think they're such nice colours. And if you want to screenshot the colours that I have in this palette, please pause this video and take a screenshot now. The brands on my swatch cards tend to be written in codes that I don't have to write the full name each time. So what I'll try to remember to do is to put a little chart of the codes down in the description box underneath the video. So now we're moving on to my warm toned palette. I used to be somebody who paints in a lot of cool colours, and then recently I've got into warmer tones. So I wanted to put together a watercolour palette that was kind of focused on these warmer tones, and this one contains 37 colours. They're from different brands again, but you'll be able to see that this palette is somewhat warmer than the one before. I've really enjoyed using this over the past maybe 9 months or so, and I've kept it as it was when I first put it together. I'm really happy with this. You'll see that there are a couple of cooler blue greys in there, but these are colours that I just love to use a lot, so I popped those in. I knew they'd be really useful, and they work really well with the warmer toned colours as well. I also have 3 very similar greens in here, but again, this is a colour I love. It's a Davies grey, and yeah, beautiful grey green, and I just use it all the time. And I love that each one is very slightly different. So you might see this in my palettes sometimes, that I tend to have colours that are quite similar to each other. I just like the subtle variations. Again, you can pause the video here and take a screenshot of this swatch card if you like. Next, we're moving on to my Deep Light palette. So this is a palette that contains all of the different colours that I have from Deep Light. They are Latvian handmade watercolour makers, and their colours are beautiful. They're really inspired by nature, so they suit my work. And a lot of the colours are granulating or have interesting texture and interesting colour separation. So I really love working with them. I love their paints so much, I actually became one of their ambassadors, so I would highly recommend these, and I've actually curated 2 palettes for them. I'll put all of the details of this down in the description box underneath the video if you want to check out my other videos on Deep Light or my palettes. And don't forget, there's a discount code as well if you want to treat yourself to something from their shop. Just use the code DeepNatasha and you'll get 10% off. And that applies to any order, not just my palettes. You can see the beautiful selection I have here. They are just stunning, and every time I open up this tin, I am super inspired to paint. I've been using them for a lot of recent work, and I'm currently working on a sketchbook project as well, so I'll be sharing that soon. So now we're moving on to the Petra Painters palette. That has really good alliteration. I recently bought this because I love Peganol products in general. In fact, I have a video coming up on all of my Peganol products very soon. But this little palette appealed to me because I just love the uniqueness of it. I love the fact that I could put 6 colours in it, so it's a very limited palette, which I often like to work with. Despite my large palettes, I often will only work with a few colours on each painting, and I really liked the fact that this could go in my Sendak artist roll. So I have a pencil roll from then that this can just fit in perfectly. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm going to show you in a second something I used it for recently. I did a roughly 25-minute sketch of a stock dove, and I used this little palette and it was just great to work with. So I look forward to using it for more things in the future, and the fact that I can travel with it too, it's quite light and portable, is going to be fantastic. Another new addition to my palette collection are these Etra Ceramic mini palettes. So I have the 19 well versions, and I wanted to get them so that I could put my Wallace Seymour vintage watercolours that were in tubes. I wanted to put them into a palette because I find, I don't know whether any of you find this, that when things are in tubes I just don't use them as much as when I can just reach for a palette. As you can see, I haven't even got around to filling in the second swatch card yet with the colours, but I'm loving these little palettes. They're so cute, and I'm really hopeful that now I'll be using the Wallace Seymour watercolours a little bit more often. These palettes aren't strictly speaking watercolour palettes, they're actually for gouache, and they are the Art Toolkit Palettes. So I bought the folio, which is the larger one, and the pocket palette, which is the smaller one. I decided that I wanted to designate these for my gouache. I had gouache in tubes, and again, as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't using it as much, I just wasn't reaching for it, but since I've put it into these little palettes, it's been amazing. I'm using it all the time. I'm using it for loads of sketchbook work. I use it for Zoom drawing sessions. I use it to travel with, so for painting on location. I actually had to get these ones from the US, but now Rosemary & Co in the UK has recently started stocking the Art Toolkit palettes, so I'll leave a link in the description below so that you can check those out if you're in the UK. The next palette we're going to have a look at is my A Gallo palette. So A Gallo are Italian handmade watercolours, and they are really beautiful to work with. I love them. But I recently cut down my collection a little bit. I have a video about this on my channel somewhere where I edited the collection down and just stuck with these colours, put them in a small tin, and I think I have another couple of colours in one of my handmade watercolour palettes, but the bulk of my collection is now in this tin, and I find that I use them more, which is brilliant. And yeah, they're just really, really lovely colours. So if you want to screenshot this little swatch card, please feel free to do so. Next up are my two Essee palettes. So the big one in the wooden box is really quite unique. These are handmade watercolours, and you can choose your own selections. That's what I did with this box. It has a magnet on either side, and it just kind of clips together with the magnets. It has a little space for like a travel brush in the centre as well. I love Essee colours. They're just really beautiful, often quite subtle or earthy colours. And this small set is called Moons and Moods, and I've used this mainly for sketchbook work at the moment. It's a really lovely little palette, and it has this separate pot of gold paint as well. This Tiny Poems About You palette has an amazing holographic sticker on the front, so I thought I'd film it from different angles so you could see how pretty it was. But it was given to me by one of my Patreon members in an amazing package last year full of gorgeous paints. It has the most beautiful, subtle earth colours in it. It's actually been tucked away in my watercolour box, the box that you saw at the beginning of this video. And I was like, I need to keep this out on my desk because it would be great for limited palette work. And I can really imagine using it a lot in my sketchbook at the moment. This is my handmade watercolour palette with lots of different brands in there. I absolutely love the way this one looks. There's just something so gorgeous about these colours together. As you can see, they're my usual selection of very moody and earthy colours, but I have so many different brands in this palette. You can see that I've used some of them more than others. This is one actually that I haven't used for a while. When I was getting it out to film for this video, I was like, this is another one I need to just leave out and not put back in the box because I need to use this. It's just so gorgeous. I mean, look at those colours. So you can screenshot that if you wish, and I'll try to remember to put the code for all of the makers of the colours down in the description underneath the video. So this is another collection of handmade watercolours. These ones are by Arkaar Creation, and these are Indian watercolours. So when I open this tin up, you'll see just how lovely these are as well. So there are more very moody, granulating, gorgeous colours, and I've used these quite a bit. You can see that I have some favourites that have really been used a lot, particularly for me. In this collection, I really like the greens and blues. I think they're just so lovely. So there's that swatch card if you want to take a screenshot of that one. Now this I always think of as my space age watercolour palette. It looks like it could come down from the sky and beam you up. It's full of core colours, which are, I think, part of the Golden company. I use Golden Acrylics. I really like their acrylics, but I only have a small collection of their watercolours, but I really like them. And I started with getting an earth set. I think it was an earth set of like 6 colours, and then I just added a few to this set, and I keep them all in the tubes in this tin. And you can see that that lid has been well used. So my Crema palette, now this is quite an unusual palette in that it is just whites, greys and blacks. And I got this when I was quite early on in my watercolour obsession and I was really getting into them again. And I really love painting monochromatically, and I love a subtle palette, like a very limited palette as well. And I loved the idea of just having different shades of grey and white and cream. This palette is really unique and interesting, and I'm so glad I have it. It's great for work where you're thinking more about tone or value. And yeah, it's just a really nice, unique addition to my watercolour collection. So now we're moving on to my Schmincke palettes. So one of them is a limited edition palette in a leather case that I bought while it was on sale at Jackson's a couple of years or so ago. And the other one is a more recent edition, and it's like a tiny retro palette in a little travel size tin. Both of these are actually mixing palettes. They're both palettes that I haven't put together. Now, I don't buy many ready-made palettes. You'll see that with most of my palettes, I choose the colours. So I thought it would be nice to have 2 sets of paints that are just mixing palettes that somebody else has put together. So in the bigger Schmincke palette, you have 12 colours, and you have of each colour, there's like a warm version, a cool version, and a muted version of that colour. And it creates some really nice mixes. So here they are swatched out, and you can screenshot this if you want to. And with the tiny retro palette, this has 8 colours, and It's just so unbelievably cute. So I only got this very, very recently, and I only used it for the first time the other week. The one thing I have done with this one is to switch out the yellow for a more permanent yellow. So the one that it came with wasn't super light fast, so that's the only colour I've changed. Occasionally I like to put together themed palettes, so this is something I've called my Magical Night palette. So all of the colours in this palette could be used for night landscapes. Now I love to paint night landscapes. It's kind of, I think, what I'm known for. I'm painting more day landscapes now, but I'm still loving the nightscapes as well. So this has several colours that are perfect for painting the night, and also a few metallics as well. So this poor little tin, this is my additional palette. That's what I'm calling it because I have no other name for it, and I accidentally dropped something on it, which is why it has a big dent in it. But I put this together because in that amazing package from my Patreon member that I told you about earlier, she included American Journey watercolours, which we can't get in the UK, and I wanted to put them all in a palette so that I would use them because they were in tubes. And so I put those in this little palette, and then I added some Isaro paints and some Daniel Smith, and just made like a nice little selection of colours, and I think they work together really well. So there's the swatch card if you want to screenshot this one. And finally we have my Fraser Price brass palette box. This is my fanciest palette and I actually bought it by saving up my affiliate credit at Jackson's a couple of years ago, and I splurged on this. And I've recently revised it, so you may remember when I featured this on my channel before that it was a palette of mixing colours. Well, now, as I wasn't using it very much, I've got those Schmincke mixing palettes. I didn't really need another one, so I've decided to put lots of handmade watercolours in there. In fact, there's a bit of a mixture because there is a Roman Szmal colour in there as well. It feels like a very inspiring palette. Okay, so that's my watercolour palette tour of 2024. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments section below which one of these palettes was your favourite. And if you have a palette of your own that you're particularly enjoying at the moment, let me know what it is and why you love it so much. Okay, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, maybe consider subscribing and clicking the little notification bell, and you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. All that remains for me to say is stay creative, and I will see you very soon. Bye for now.